We are the Whovian Review, and I'm Michael.
And I'm Shelby.
And you might not know, but we're actually doing a Doctor Who panel right now. Let's get started.
Oh, and also just as an FYI, we are recording this to put on our podcast later, so if any of you ask questions at the end and want to hear yourselves, we will be passing out flyers with info on that.
Oh boy, sounds fun. At any rate, so today we're actually going to talk about the women of the program. Sorry, man. But we're actually going to go through history and talk about how the woman's role has evolved.
For those of you who don't know, Doctor Who is a British science fiction show started in 1963. It's about a time-traveling alien named the Doctor, who travels through time and space in a police box-shaped time machine known as the TARDIS.
It's so small.
Not on the inside.
So we're going to go back to 1963 when this program actually started. And as you might tell or see, we are in black and white.
And the women of the time in the show really played the roles more of sort of damsels in distress, and basically they were there to be rescued.
We start with the very first two companions, Susan and Barbara. Now Susan, unfortunately for some of you who may not have seen her before, is also known as the Doctor's granddaughter. She was brave at times, but usually fell into the role of damsel in distress. Barbara, on the other hand,
she was still a damsel in distress, but she was a much stronger character, and she was actually set up to be a role model of women of the time, which is, looking back from today's perspective, is a little bit unfortunate since she did frequently depend on the other companion at the time, Ian, to come rescue her.
Although she did rescue him once, technically.
Once.
Moving right into Sarah Kingdom. Now Sarah Kingdom was the exception to the rule. She actually was in one story called The Dalek Master Plan. She actually was in a role where it could have been a man or a woman, because she was a security guard with a trigger-happy gun. Not typical for Doctor Who, I know. But she was definitely a stronger role model for women, I guess, in a
And
sense.
she was a hero, too.
Definitely a hero of sorts, because she ended up sacrificing her life to defeat the Daleks.
And then we have Zoe. Now, she was back to the more damsel in distress-y type woman, but she was also a computer genius from the future. So on one hand, it was very nice to see, them showing a woman who was into computer science, who was very intelligent and helped out and could keep up with the Doctor scientifically. But on the other hand, she was also very subservient and screamed a lot. So this was how the writers viewed the women of the future.
She did make Jamie very happy, though. The 70s. We get into color all of a sudden.
Yeah, and that's not the only thing that changed here. Now we actually start to see a little bit of development of the women in the show.
Absolutely. We'll go straight into Liz Shaw, who was a scientist herself. Not only that, but she was UNITS, the United Nations Intelligence Task Force scientific advisor.
A role that the Doctor eventually took over.
Exactly. And she also could keep up with the Doctor. She actually talked to him on his level. Unfortunately, that didn't always help the audience, who had no idea what they were talking about.
And then they sort of backtracked a little bit with Jo Grant. She was not scientific. She was really cute. She had a great relationship with the Doctor. In fact, the actors had a great relationship as well. But she did a lot of, screaming and being rescued, although she did some rescuing herself.
The producers at the time decided that Liz Shaw had not quite fit the traditional companion role. So they wanted to make sure that the companion actually went on to become someone who the Doctor could have an actual relationship with. Not romantic, but actually more of a father-daughter, or maybe bigger or older uncle kind of thing.
That said, she does actually leave the Doctor to go get married.
Yes, and it was a very sad ending.
And it's a plot point we're going to address again later with a later companion who also gets married.
Sarah Jane Smith. Now this is a favorite for a lot of fans.
Often known as the quintessential companion.
Definitely. She was a journalist. She was inquisitive. She asked all the right questions. Never a wrong one.
Yeah, and she was intelligent, spunky, and really kind of, had more of a personality compared to her predecessors.
She was such a fan favorite that the Doctor actually gave her a robot dog known as K9.
And the producers, I guess, gave her own spin-off series.
They did, actually 2 of them. If you count the one from the 80s that only had 1 episode.
I know.
Well, anyway, she also was with 3 different Doctors, and technically, if you count Sarah Jane Adventures, she was with 4.
Then we get to Leela. Now, Leela was originally conceived to please the fathers who would watch after the football results. But she was actually, and as you can see here, a lot of that was because they put her in a leather bikini.
Pretty much.
But she actually was an awesome companion. She was a warrior from a planet that sort of had degraded back culturally, and she joined the Doctor, was fiercely loyal, liked to stab people with poison thorns, and was often, defending him in lots of situations. She kind of took on it upon herself to be his protector. And she ended up going and marrying a Time Lord, so go figure.
She also argued with K9 quite often. Romana Varatralunda. Try saying that 5 times fast.
I can't say it once.
She was the Time Lady. She started in the late 70s, and she joined the 4th incarnation of the Doctor. And as you can tell from the 2 incarnations at the bottom, she had quite a bit of personality.
So, for those of you who don't know, regeneration is something that Time Lords go through when they're dying. They change all the cells in their body, they get a new face, a new personality, but retain all their memories and all their core beliefs. So during the show, Romana regenerated into the blonde there. It was the second one.
Yes, definitely. And I think she mellowed a bit when she regenerated. She got a little bit better on with the Doctor.
She was very strong counterpart to him. She, in fact, did better than he did in school and always brought it up. She really held her own in so many ways. It was essentially much more of a team relationship than it was sort of, the leader and follower.
And I should mention that a lot of times the Doctor and the companion get separated, to which the companion wants to get back to the Doctor. Well, Romana didn't have to get back to the Doctor because she could take on all the problems that the Doctor was taking on because she kind of had the same ideas. Moving into the colorful 80s. Just look at me and you can see why. At this point, we get to have a vast array of very headstrong companions, but yet the producer, John Nathan Turner at the time, decided to bring back the 1960s vibe with a more screaming kind of damsel in distress again.
Although, to be fair, these were also mostly scientists. And there were also some male companions who were scientists who were also essentially damsels in distress. So it might have had more to do with society's perception of scientists than of women.
Who knows? We'll start off with 2 that are a little bit out of sequence, Tegan and Harry. Both of these 2 companions were from the era that I started with. They both also had the ability to tell you what they were thinking.
And the inability to stop.
Sometimes. Harry actually was also one of the few companions that could fend off the Master, who, of course, we'll get to later on in the program.
But he hypnotized a lot of people throughout the series, and she was the only one who could actually resist it.
Probably that voice of hers, or that whining voice.
Yeah, and Tegan was known as a mouth on legs by the actress who played her.
Yes, that's her quote, not ours.
A what? A mouth?
A mouth on legs.
Then we move on to Nyssa, who was
sidelined, basically.
Basically a sideline character for much of her tenure there. She started the 4th and moved on to the 5th Doctor. She was also from a far-off world and was very technologically advanced. As a matter of fact, science and math were kind of her specialty.
Yeah, she goes off to save a civilization from horrible diseases, but largely she didn't have much of a role.
No, unfortunately. Melanie didn't have much of a role because of her short tenure, but we put her in here because, again, she was a great screamer, but she was also a computer programmer who actually did quite well in the audio series afterwards.
It was unfortunate for her because she actually had a lot to her that would have made a very great and strong female role model, but she was cast because of her epic scream, and that's pretty much what they had her doing.
And it was almost a precursor to the companion that changes everything from here on out.
Ace.
Ace was a companion that was young. She was a teenager. She was spiteful. She liked to carry around Nitro 9 canisters to blow things up.
And she had a backstory. And she was intrinsically involved in the plot. Now, this had really never happened before. You had the companions there, sometimes as plot points, sometimes just to ask questions, but we never really had someone who was very important to moving the story along, and the story really couldn't happen without her. Also, she was really written as sort of a person who happened to be female, as opposed to someone that they were trying to show this is how women should be. So she was really the most truly well-rounded one up until this point.
And as you can tell, she's excited about it. Moving into the wilderness years, this is the period of time where there really wasn't anything going on except for audios and novels and comics and everything else. The companion continued on Ace's track of actually having a lot more backstory and very deep relationship with the Doctor.
Speaking of deep relationships with the Doctor,
Yes, definitely.
we move on to the next.
Exactly. The current series, we have a bunch of brand new companions. And the female companion actually overall becomes more a part of the storyline on an overall arc as opposed to just kind of there in every single episode.
Starting off with Rose. Now, this is what I was alluding to with the relationship, because she and the Doctor had a very strong romantic relationship, which was sort of the first of this type of thing. The other interesting thing about Rose is that she was the first one who really went back and visited her family regularly. So it actually started off a platform for them to have real lives while they traveled with the Doctor. The others just sort of would vanish and then get dropped back home at the very end of their adventures, or not if they were unfortunate. But Rose went back and dragged the Doctor along to go visit her mom frequently, and her boyfriend, who was kind of the gooseberry of the lot.
Definitely. Martha joined the TARDIS after Rose left in unfortunate circumstances. And she also had a thing for the Doctor, but unfortunately the Doctor did not share in his feelings for her.
And in fact, that's why she ended up leaving, because she couldn't handle the discrepancy there.
Yet she did walk the earth for the Doctor, so...
And interestingly, after she left, she got pulled in for a few episodes the next season, and she was actually a much stronger and better person afterwards. This was kind of an interesting thing, because it showed that from her experience, she learned a lot from it and was able to take that and grow much more than she could have if she had stayed.
Definitely. Some companions you all might notice, or know. Donna Noble.
Yes.
Noblest of them all.
Here we finally went back to the Doctor and his companions being more friends, because the romance thing got in the way of the plot a lot.
Yeah, Donna was definitely a feisty companion. She was a redhead, and the Doctor's been wanting to be a redhead forever. She definitely showed her red side. She spoke her mind, kind of similar to the 80s companions, but she also had an extreme amount of growth from when she first started on the program in The Runaway Bride to the point where she departs.
And at that point, she saves the whole universe and actually gets confidence, because she was an extremely insecure person. But unfortunately, she has to have her mind wiped and forget everything that happened, so she has to revert back to when she was pretty miserable. So that was a very tragic exit.
Amy continues in the redhead lineup.
And here we have someone who does get married and just drags her husband along, and they continue traveling with the Doctor, unlike what Joe did. In fact, in the Sarah Jane Adventures, Joe finds out about this and is kicking herself. She's like, "What? I only left you to get married."
Definitely. And then we have the impossible girl herself, Clara Oswald.
Now, this companion is really the most intrinsic to the plot of any of them so far.
She goes around saving pretty much every single Doctor at every single point in time at some point.
Yeah, and really the plot largely revolves around her for a while, even outside of that.
Exactly. She goes on to have a love interest, so she actually gets to go back, kind of like all three of these companions go back and visit their own relatives along the line, but she actually gets to see her grandmother, and the doctor happens to be naked in that one.
And also, she ends up sort of saving everyone, and then